Hello everyone and welcome to another extremely requested game from yesterday's Charity Cup. It is from the final game of day 2 from round 8 and it's Liren versus Praggnanandhaa, and only a month after Praggnanandhaa defeated Magnus Carlsen in that famous game in the Air Things Masters. If you haven't seen it, do check it out. The link will be the first thing in the description below. We have here Pragu meeting against, a member of the candidates tournament. Now you might be saying, but Ding is not playing in the candidates tournament. Surely this is a mistake. Well, not really. As of today, some of you might not have heard, Sergei Karjakin has been banned from chess for a period of 6 months. And as this overlaps with the candidates tournament, he will be replaced by, for the moment, Ding Liren, as he is the highest rated player who is eligible to qualify for the candidates, but only if he plays 26 classical games before the actual start of the candidates tournament, as that is the required amount for him to be able to play. So we'll see. This shouldn't be a problem for him. The only problem would be if he actually plays those 26 games and then he loses rating and he can no longer qualify via rating. But I don't think that should be a problem for Ding. So here, basically, Prague is playing against, a very, very probable member of the 2022 candidates tournament. So it's a very exciting game, very fighting game. You guys will enjoy it. Let's dive straight into it. Ding with the white pieces opens with knight to f3. He goes for the Reti opening. d5 by Prague, g3 and c5. Prague is playing very principled, as Ding is going for this sort of a hyper-modern approach. Prague is grabbing the center here. So bishop to g2, knight to c6, and now striking in the center with d4. We have knight to f6, continuing development, castles, and e6 now. We have c4, attacking Prague's central pawn structure, and now d captures on c4. And usually, as this is a very well-known position, queen to a4 is played, you prevent b5, you threaten queen captures on c4, and the game just continues. But here, Ding goes d captures on c5. So it's not as common as the line that we've discussed, but also very much a playable one. So here, Prague trades queens, captures, and the bishop captures on c5. And of course, knight b to d2, just going after the pawn on c4. And if you defend with b5, hoping that you would keep your extra pawn, then knight e5, and that's just it. Black would have to give up the knight for the rook, and the white will be better for the rest of the game. So Prague, of course, knows that that's impossible. He is familiar with the line. He plays c3, now ruins white's pawn structure, b captures on c3, and it's a good example. If you have to give back the pawn, at least get something in return for just giving back the pawn. Here we have castles, and now knight to b3, attacking the bishop, bishop back to e7, and now knight f to d4, again putting pressure on that c6 square. And here, bishop to d7 can be played if you don't want to rush anything, because what the Ding wants is for Prague to capture on d4, and then Ding will fix his pawn structure with c captures on d4. But Prague again shows that he knows this very well. He allows this. Knight captures, we have c captures on d4. And now knight to d5. An excellent square for the knight, unless the knight can be, dislocated with a move like e4. But here it would be a bit premature. If e4 here, knight to c3 attacks the rook, and once the rook moves somewhere, because we are kind of threatening knight e2 check to win the bishop pair, let's say rook to e1, you can play bishop to d7. Now bishop to b5 can come. Again, you will be threatening knight to e2 check, so already you maybe give black a little bit... a bit too much. So here, bishop to d2, Ding just guards the c3 square. Now he's ready to push e4, and now Prague does not allow this. He plays f5, guards the e4 square. So now knight to a5, for the moment putting the knight on the edge of the board, preventing Prague from developing the light square bishop. So how do you play this? Well, just b6. That's the way to do it. We challenge the knight. We give the knight this very active c6 square. Now the bishop on e7 is attacked, and the bishop to f6 now. Here we have a4, preparing a5 at some point to open up the a file, and just bishop to b7. We attack the knight on c6, and now the position has been reached before. It was reached in 2015 in a game between Hari Kadronavali and Xiaowen Zheng that ended in a draw after knight to e5 was played. But here we have bishop captures on d5. Ding deviates from that game, and it is now, as of move 18, that we have a completely new game. So of course the piece has to be recaptured. We have e captures on d5. e5, and now knight back to e5 by Ding. We have bishop to a6. Now, you could maybe try to prevent ideas like knight to d7, but this doesn't really worry Pragu. He just goes for bishop to a6. The e2 pawn is hanging, and also if you play something like e3, then we happily trade. Here we mess up white's pawn structure, and then we just continue. It's hard to say if this could be anything, as the bishops are of opposite colors, so if the rooks come off the board, shouldn't be much, but Ding says that he can do better, of course. He plays king to f1, and now we have rook f to e8, threatening to win a pawn here. So f4, and now rook e back to c8. No longer is the rook needed here. We have king to e1, unpinning, so now we can move the pawn if we want to, and now bishop to c4. And this is a very good move by Pragu. The thing is, if you play something like rook to c2, or let's say you want to play a very active move with the rook, the problem is white has this a5 move, and now Ding is threatening to pick up the b6 pawn, and the bishop, well, is not placed very well here. So we would have to go for something like rook to b2, a captures, rook captures, and now maybe not a position that you would enjoy. Okay, Pragu does have the passed a pawn, but we will very easily stop it. We still have a bishop here. Our rooks can easily be doubled on the a file. So he doesn't like this. He plays bishop to c4, now saying, okay, if you ever capture on c4, I can just capture with the pawn and I get a beautiful passed c pawn. So rook d to b1 by Ding, and now rook a to b8. Here, Prague wants to play a6 and b5 and create a pass pawn, as he does have a 2-to-1 advantage on the queen side, and rook to b2 now. With the idea of doubling up on the b file, we have a6 and now bishop to b4, preparing bishop to d6 to kick away the rook from the b8 square, b5, trying to create a pass pawn, and the bishop to d6 now. And here Pragu has to decide, does he move the rook right away, or does he want to trade bishop for knight first? Because this is possible. White will first have to react to this, because then if captures, you can just capture with the bishop. So it's definitely a possibility if you think that white's knight here is stronger than your bishop on f6. But still, you have the bishop pair. If they come alive, it's definitely worth the wait. So here, rook to a8, getting the rook out of harm's way, and now Ding decides to go for a5. He blocks the position, but also in doing so, he gives Pragu the passed b pawn, but it's very unlikely that this pawn is ever going anywhere. So here, rook to d8, challenging the bishop here, bishop to c5, and now rook a to c8. Putting the rook on the only open file on the board, but again, it's very unlikely that you are breaking through here. So king d2, Ding wants to bring his king all the way to b4. It is the most active square his king can reach. And now g5, pushing on the king's side. We have king to c3, Pragu plays h5. We have e3, and now king to g7. So both players just putting their every piece on optimal square, because before going for that final breakthrough, king to b4, and now rook to h8. If the h file opens up, of course, you want to have a rook on the h file, h3 by Ding, and now g4. And now this is the final piece of the of the puzzle. If something like h4 is played, then the position is completely blocked. There is no way to break through, and here we just call it a day, and it's a draw. But Ding says, I'm not ready to call it a draw just yet. Rook to h2. He wants to continue fighting, and okay, now Pragu plays bishop captures on e5, f captures on e5, so he gives Ding the pass pawn, but also he messes up Ding's pawn structure here. Bishop back to d3, and now pawn to e6. As the e6 square is not covered by anything, we can play pawn to e6, pawn to e7, and this rook will remain, or rather pawn will remain on e7 forever, so it will be an extremely strong pass pawn. Bishop to e4, and now pawn to e7. And now the thing is, here you could continue in a lot of different ways, but Pragu plays king to f7. He has a very specific idea in mind, even though the absolute best move recommended by the engine is just h4. This allows Pragu to also create a very strong pass pawn. For example, if g captures, you're going to push g3, and once the rook moves, or rather maybe even rook to g1, just pinning the pawn, you can play g2. Your pawn is now nicely protected on g2, and at some point white will have to give up the exchange for this pawn. So while this is possible, Pragu prepares something else. He plays king to f7, and now Ding says, all right, I admit I have nothing better here. I could just, okay, I could capture on g4, but then we just trade on the h file, and nothing is really happening. So I'm going to close the structure, play h4, and now it would seem the game is a draw, or maybe I can do something with my e7 pawn far into the future. But still, both players are very low on time, so you don't really have all that much time to plan. But now Pragu plays rook h to e8, and after rook to a3, Pragu goes for, well, not for the kill, but for something to play for more than a draw. He plays rook captures on e7, so he gives up the rook for bishop and this e7 pawn, but not just for that. By doing this, he also will get this rook to c4 check move in, which will which will win him the c file all to himself, as the bishop covers the c2 square, so rook is not able to come to c2. It will take Ding a few moves to get back into the game. So here bishop captures on e7. This is an absolute must. Rook to c4 check. Now comes king to b3, and here king captures on e7. And now there are many ways for Ding to continue this game, and there are many good ways to continue this game, like just a rook to a1 first. We can prepare this, but Ding plays, he wants to get rid of black's rook on the c file even faster, and he plays king to b2. He now wants to play rook to c3, but this simply will not do. Pragu plays king to d6. Now comes rook to c3. Here he wants to trade rooks, but now the position is completely winning for Pragu, so feel free to pause the video and win the game for Pragu while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on realizing that the winning move is the move that is most often the winning move. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, of course, the move is pawn to b4. That's the good stuff. Now, what do you do with the rook? Obviously, if you just capture, then we play d captures on c4. We have two connected pass pawns with the bishop very, very strong on this diagonal. This will be just winning. And on top of that, we're going to pick up this pawn. Then we're going to push the a pawn as well. There is nothing for white to do. White has a rook, but that rook has absolutely nothing to do. The only way to break through is if this bishop somehow moves, maybe we can pick up the f-pawn, but it's very unlikely that that will happen. So there is no move that Ding can play here. King to, after b4, rook to c1 was played. Of course, Ding did not capture on c4. Now comes king to c6. We are going after this pawn. Rook to d2 now, and king to b5. We have rook d to d1. And here comes bishop to f3, challenging the rook on d1, rook to f1, and now just king captures on a5. So now the a pawn will start marching forward. Rook captures on c4, we have d captures on c4, and now d5. Here Ding is hoping for bishop captures and then rook captures. This will attack the bishop as the king is on a5. But here Pragu just plays c3, check, and it was in this position on move 49 that Ding Liren resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So really, really impressive game against, well, a very, very probable candidate of the 2022 candidates tournament, Ding Liren. Here you resign because, well, if you go here, of course, we want to move the bishop so we can capture on f5. But if king b3, then we capture the pawn with check. If king c2, we just play bishop to e4 check, and now you either go up the board and then we capture with check, or you go down the board, then b3 is happening, and now look at this. All of the squares are covered. Bishop covers this, b2, b1 is coming, b1 is covered by the bishop, and there is absolutely nothing white can do here. So of course Ding does not play this after c3 check. So a remarkable game by Ding, where he shows, well, not just that he outclassed Ding in preparation as he played it, well, more precisely, he even made an improvement on the, or rather, he didn't make an improvement. The Ding played sort of a lesser move than in the game that was played in 2015, the Harika Dronavali game that we mentioned, and also, I mean, okay, Ding did maybe try to force it a little bit, as maybe if h4 was played in the right moment, the game is just a draw, but there is no need to draw right away. We will first explore all the options, and then if the game is still a draw, we will draw. But Pragu went for that beautiful, we can show it one more time, idea of just preparing this, just going after the pawn, giving up the rook for only a bishop and the pawn, but you can see how much it means to win the entire open file for yourself. And then the two rooks were completely helpless against the light square bishop and the rook controlling the c file. So a very thematic game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and well, just a brilliant victory for Pragu, who came into this game after his brilliant victory against Eric Hansen. So that was also a very very clean one. So yeah, once again, hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Timo Salo, Kojo Owushu, Lucas Falcao Radelli, Christy Maloney, and Ovidio Alexa for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this incredible event until it finishes. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day, and do check out the news and the game against Magnus in the description if you still haven't seen it. See you soon.